So, not sure how many people have seen this. This thing came out probably a couple years ago. Ended up seeing it on Twitter one night, and it was like, yeah, they got us. They figured us out. It's true. Can't deny it. So now I use it as like a cover for all my stuff. So the definition seems pretty accurate for me. So my name's Derek. That's all I do for the intro. This is kind of a brain dump on threat modeling. If you see me using my phone, it's just because that's how I time my presentations, because I'm that stupid. I don't have any other fancy shit to use. So it's how I keep myself on track. Basically, do the disclaimer. Presentations, just my views. When I talk, I'm pretty much of a smart ass. I use the F word. So it was interesting one time someone had their young ones in a talk with me, and I'm like, yeah, you might not want to do that. But so basically, so it's not meant to be like I'm trying to show off how smart I am. I learned a lot of what I learned by fucking up multiple times. You ever heard that thing, don't make the same mistake twice? Anyone heard that? Yeah, fuck that. I make the same mistake 3 times. I'm human. Don't really care. It's going to happen, right? So basically, the other thing I do differently is, you know, you present something, you tell people what you're going to tell them, you tell them it, you tell them it again. I don't do that shit either. I have really busy slides. If you want to read them while I'm talking, go ahead. This one doesn't have as bad as slides as other ones. I basically don't follow any rules of speaking, because what I do here is I come up as a practitioner. I'm here to share knowledge. I'm not selling you shit. I don't have a company. I'm just a geek that works for corporate America. I have sat on all sides of the table, being a vendor, contractor, etc., so I have multiple perspectives in it. This is a pure brain dump, and when it comes to threat modeling, it's just a tough thing to pull off for anybody, just so you know. That's what I think of it. Overused term. Everyone does it to some extent. I think we could do it a little bit better and more of it overall in the industry, and that's where I'm going to show you the kind of conclusions I'm coming up with how to do it. But first, anybody here 5 years or less into the industry? A few? Okay. So what I always run by people when they first get in the industry, the first thing you need to learn is the 4 reasons why people are nice to you. Right? They either fear you, they're setting you up so they can screw you over, they're just placating you so you'll shut up and walk away. I do that one a lot to people. Really nice. Yeah, shut up, go away. I don't want to work today. Or they just want something from you, even if it is just to help you out to make themselves feel better. So whenever people are nice to you, immediately be on guard as a security person. Try to figure out what the hell they're up to, right? And you know what? The other thing before, because I know what some of you are thinking, I'm not paranoid. I'm right. So threat modeling. Interesting definitions. What happened is I decided to build this presentation kind of on a challenge. Someone wanted me to speak elsewhere on threat modeling a while back, and I started getting into how to actually build a presentation on this. So it starts with all these definition searches on the internet, which I source where I find them. You'll see all the URLs and stuff. But basically, what all the definitions focus on is you're trying to optimize spend. You're trying to prioritize based on risk. That's what everything always comes down to. You can put all the fancy wording around it you want to, but you're trying to figure out what the hell should we be doing, in what order, and how much should we be spending on it. And the goal of that is not to be secure, because you're never going to be secure. We all know that stupid analogy with the turn a computer into a boat anchor bullshit, right? It's like, it's a good story, but like once you hear it and then keep hearing it for 20 years, you get really sick of it. So the reality is how much to spend, when to spend it, in what order, and it's all about showing due diligence. So when something bad happens to you, because if anyone really wants to take you out, they're going to, and you end up in court and you end up in front of people questioning what the hell you did, you can say, we did due care and diligence and knew what we were doing and why, and knew what we weren't doing and why. By the way, I just described a risk register, which you can start off in Excel if you don't have a fancy GrrC tool. So Microsoft came up with their own definition of threat modeling, cornered the market. Long story short, they're talking about software threat modeling. This talk is not about software threat modeling. I think software threat modeling is horrendously shitty, because what it does is it looks at services and ports and stuff like that, which you're going to find as a course of normal scanning and penning. So they look at things from the whole, what's allowed through the firewall, which people bypass anyway, and what ports and what vulnerabilities are on there. It's like, yes, you need an SDLC, I get that, and there's a little bit of threat modeling maybe needed there, but what I'm talking about in this talk is the layer 1 through layer 8. 8th layer of the OSI model being humans, right? What accounts for getting phished? You ever see that in the threat modeling software? No. Well, okay, then the shit's worthless to me, right? That's where I started over. What's not threat modeling it's not operationalizing threat intel, right? Using IOCs. Everyone know what IOC is? Indicator of compromise, also called a pattern. When people are fucking slamming patterns, we still use patterns everywhere, almost for everything. If you really think about it, it's still a damn pattern. Looking to detect anomalies. You're looking for the normal behavior in something that doesn't match that pattern of normalcy. So you won't hear me slam patterns because we're going to use them forever. So basically, ISACs, the stuff you get from them, typically day-old donuts. Basically, part of threat modeling, you need to know about the tactics and techniques and procedures that the people are using against you, right? That kind of gets into threat modeling a bit. I did here just the threat intel pyramid of pain because I found it. It comes in handy to talk to people about in general, because when threat modeling comes up, IOCs come up. So you'll see a lot of this stuff, you're going to wonder, why the hell is this bundled into a presentation? I keep decks together with shit that I use together all the time that comes up in conversations. And you see how much it gets really tough to start getting TTPs, right? The tactics, tools, techniques, processes, all that shit that the bad guys use. Guess what? That's where threat modeling's at. So threat modeling's a lot of gray area stuff. It's not that cut and dry. So it's kind of why we still have humans. But food for thought. It's not, I've seen people try to automate threat modeling. Maybe if they're doing the service discovery for software threat modeling and trying to figure out we call that vulnerability scanning. We've been doing that forever, or WAS scanning, or whatever, web application security scanning. So I did a Google search. Comes up with OWASP first. Do a Google search, same browser without closing it out, clearing the cache or anything. 2 seconds later, get different results slightly. Just kind of funny, so I put it in there. I'm weird that way. I'll warn you, the slide decks used to be a lot different. So what happened is I got old, gained more weight. I was like 30 pounds heavier a few months back. The doctor said, you're pre-diabetic. I'm like, the hell does that mean? Oh, shit, no beer. So I had to switch to vodka. So instead of beer and Jaeger, I would always write my shit sober, but then edit it beer, doing shots of Jaeger. Now it's vodka and shots of tequila. There's actually less interesting slides that pop in after an edit when I'm drinking vodka versus beer. So interesting trivia point. So when did all the threat modeling start in my mind? Believe it or not, I think it was literally Bruce Schneier's attack trees. I remember trying to make sense of this shit back in the very late, as in 99. It's really early 2000s for all practical purposes. I got a whole other talk that proves we're still stuck in 2003, and that the only thing that's changed is new tools in buzzwords. And I actually have proof that I've downloaded off the internet all over the frickin' place, and I can map everything out like there ain't shit new going on. Except talking about stuff. We're better at marketing. Yay. And cooler tools, which we need to have over time. So that's what attack trees look like. They were kind of ugly, difficult to work with. I don't really think they took off that much. Then you go in, you got this stride and dread stuff. Stride, right? Spoofing identity, tampering with the data, repudiation, information disclosure, blah, blah, denial of service. Not really the most complete of models. Again, I'm trying to cover layer 1 through layer 8 with whatever's going to happen, like at a retail facility, at a warehouse, in an environment that's doing defense contracting, right? All kinds of, it's layer 1 through 8 of the OSI. I'm not trying to it's hard to cover everything, but dread, I always skip to the third bullet. Damage plus reproducibility plus exploitability plus affected users plus discoverability divided by 5. So, thing that pisses me off most about risk, some of you probably have heard of the FAIR method. I don't hate it. I would never really want to use it. Here's what I found over the past 20 years. The more bullshit I try to throw math into, like this pseudo math, the more time I spend ending up doing the same shit I was going to do anyway. And you're going to see a slide here that's going to list the 9 or 10 things you're going to fucking do no matter what. Doesn't matter. It's all going to boil down to this shit. And you're going to buy varying amounts of it for varying places and put it in different ways. 20 years of the same old shit. I'm just telling you. You want to spend time on the math? If you got time for that, awesome. More power to you. I've never had the time to waste on it. So I tend to go away from models that have too much of that in it. Because you know what else? At the end of the day, they can't prove shit. You can go do this calculation, and your people might look at you from a company and say, well, we've been in business for 15 years and never been hacked. All you end up doing is looking stupid. They give you a seat at the little kids' table. It's like, you can't tell me the sky's falling. Unlike InfoSec Twitter, where the sky's falling, the world ends every frickin' month. The two most annoying things about Twitter, I need Twitter to keep up on shit and to get threat intel. But the two most annoying things are watching all these conversations of shit that we were talking about 20 years ago and even further, because we were talking about it from the shit we read from the papers written in the 80s and 70s over and over again like it's new. The pissing and moaning and drama, obviously that sucks. And then Also, just the fact that you got nothing new, total drama, and then the world's ending every month. So it hasn't happened in a while, but I'm not sure it ended this month yet on Twitter. Other convoluted shit, CVSS, Octave. Again, this is all stuff. CVSS kind of helps with some things with contracts where you can build it in and say anything with a CVS 6 or above because PCI says so, fix the shit within a month to hold contractors accountable. So it has some uses in that respect. Anything with a CVS 10 is definitely really bad, but you're not going to build a threat model off CVSS scores because CVSS scores don't account for the humans and all the other crazy shit that goes on. We're talking threat modeling versus vulnerability management. Vulnerability management, which I do an entire talk on elsewhere, is where you kind of get into CVSS a bit if you're smart. There's a way to use it without screwing yourself. You can actually use it without causing a bunch of extra work. So generic risk models. See that? I told you, shitty slide. Always got some in there. You can get it later off my website to actually read it, or read it now if you want to, if you can see it. But I always got shitty slides like this. Basically, risk comes down to likelihood and impact. This is where I like to keep it simple. Likelihood and impact. There are ways to affect likelihood and impact. Decrease them with mitigating controls. Not to be a pedant, but I get pissed off about when people use PCI as compensating controls because the compensating control is supposed to offer equivalent protection. Many times you can't, so you mitigate it the best you can. That's not the same as a compensating control because you're not really equaling what you were going to do otherwise, right? And then basically, I've broken out some slides to make it a little easier. Well, hold on a second. So likelihood and impact is where you've got to build out lists. I'll get to them a couple slides later, where the one caution I'm going to throw you on this is you can get really complex and have a list of 20 things you click through to see how likely something is or what the impact will really be. And how do you know if something's going to happen 25% of the time versus 50% of the time? It's really difficult to do. It's one of those things like if you ever seen companies implement help desk systems, they start out with 5 queues and end up with 50 because everyone wants their own queue. This can get out of hand as well, so good luck with that. It's different every environment I'm in, right? And it's just kind of stuff like, how is there an exploit available on the internet and it's internet facing? It's obviously more likely to happen, stuff like that. Yeah, environment would be company and vertical, both. So I've been in a few different verticals and companies. Some companies do things differently than others. Some you can't get to put in a risk register worth of shit. Others you can, even in the same vertical. So that's a good question. Everything, and also the other thing you'll notice, my bias is towards, I've been in a lot of large enterprises. So I'm usually in enterprises where I'm talking like over 100,000 endpoints, and that shows in my talk. And I freely admit that as an industry, someone called me out once on Twitter, and rightfully so, that we do a horrifically shitty job of scaling down. I have no good answers for SMBs, I really don't. I don't know how to handle stuff when I don't have enough budget. It's just the way it is. Like, honestly, I'm used to the enterprise way of things. So it's kind of it shows in the talks. So my apologies if you're in an SMB. Hopefully you still get some good shit out of this. Odds are it's just you'll hear me talking like I have a team to do stuff sometimes when you might not at that level. Microsoft came out with their own threat modeling tool because they're Microsoft. And so I downloaded it and loaded it on a scratch box. Isn't that shit pretty? So what it does is it draws all kinds of pretty pictures for everything that interacts with everything else in a nice diagram, which will change, 10 minutes later or a day later or the next SEV call? I mean, we all know this shit. Anybody have accurate network diagrams? I mean, you can pull it off now and then, but really, in today's world, it's getting harder and harder, especially if you move partially into the cloud, you're in a hybrid mode. So it draws pretty pictures, really pretty pictures. It tells you things like summary statistics, descriptions. You can start entering in these elements and say this exact threat here. You can spend like literally thousands of hours inside this tool, and it's really for software threat modeling. So I tried to see if I could bastardize it and use it for regular threat modeling, and I couldn't. We'll get more on that later. IONS has one for customers only. Simplified version of $. Talked to one of their people once. Man, did I piss him off. Because they don't like all the software threat modeling types. That's all they want to push. And you might do some threat modeling in your SDLC for when you're developing shit, but it's not the threat modeling those of us, what I call in the infrastructure side, want that accounts for everything, including people. CIS has a fairly decent community attack model. Some of these are a little bit blurry, changes each time. There's where you got attack stages. I like this. So I like the whole attack stage model. that came up with that report from Lockheed on APT, the stages they move through, getting a foothold, moving laterally, establishing persistence, stuff like that. I favor that in threat models because our controls work better or differently or different controls at different points in that process. So I like a kill chain threat model, basically, that accounts for the kill chain. Totally agree with that. So CIS has this stuff in yellow I highlighted. Interestingly enough, and I read this and I'm like, this is actually very well put. So I'm actually just going to read it. You make sense of large amounts of summarized attack data and organize it in a way that can be naturally mapped into countermeasures, right? That's your technologies like IPS, stuff like that. And it's consistent with security frameworks. So you take all of your countermeasures and you can map them back to a NIST cybersecurity framework or the SANS top 20 for controls. Remember the difference between a framework and controls. They'll tell you that on the SANS website. You got the top 20 controls that gives you prioritized controls to use based on real world attack data. You can argue subtleties in some of those first ones, but it's a pretty decent place to start. And then you can map it against the NIST framework, which is more comprehensive. Honestly, I see a lot of companies do top 20 for 3 to 5 years before they get to NIST, because there's a hell of a lot to do if you do it right. And the other thing is, remember, just a caution here, because former used to make money assessing for top 20. If you're doing the CIS, now it's called Center for Internet Security Top 20, you need to probably make some of your own controls for your environment. Most assessors will tell you that if they're doing their job. So you can't just go with the sub-controls they give you. You may have to tailor it for your environment. Some won't apply. I'm in an environment where whitelisting is never going to happen. Just strike that. We don't even rate ourselves against that. So this is what I just talked about, because I always talk about shit ahead of time. I even got a neat thing this time that showed me the next slide, and I'm still doing that. So cool. And then, of course, somebody had to make an application for it. And a chart that tells you theirs is best. And no, I haven't read this book. I've read a little bit of stuff on threat modeling here and there and never really got into it gets too complex. At the end of the day, there's your cybersecurity domains. This is all the shit you got to account for when you're doing threat modeling in some respect. Controls, all that kind of stuff. How do you test them? What areas do you got to cover? So that's a nice mess. I love this. I love how the meter attack matrix is being used in products. I haven't found a way to use it in threat modeling because I haven't had the need to describe attacks in that much detail yet. You get phished and they root you. You get phished and they get user level authority on the machine and move laterally from here. I haven't had a need to go into this level of detail of exactly how they got in. I'm usually starting with the threat modeling of they got in through phishing, they got in through Wi-Fi, something like that. So this is really cool. I just haven't found a way to hook it in without getting all complicated. Right? I want shit that I can explain in an elevator pitch to somebody so they understand why I'm spending money on something, why I'm prioritizing what I am. The consumption of your threat modeling material, radical concept, it ends up being your board, as crazy as that sounds. That presentation you get to do annually, and then you have to follow up with the audit committee, hopefully more often. You've got to take all this shit and get it to, ultimately going to the board for money, saying we want this amount of money, we're going to spend it in this order on this many things, here's why we're going to do it, here's what it covers. You get into this level of detail, even just 2 levels up, at my director level, you're going to be like, really, system time discovery, MS build, video, what the hell? They pay us to take care of that shit and put it into easy words form. So I just saw this. What it all came down to is that thing actually makes a point where, and I love this, so technology does a lot more when you're trying to figure out shit's happening to you, like log management, and protect it, right? And then as you do the response stuff and you're doing your incident response controls, people become more important. One of the things I think people neglect in threat modeling is they focus so much on the technical controls, they don't focus on the people controls. I swear to God, I'm going to go blue in the face. Everything, there's 5 different areas I talk on. Vul management, log management, a couple others, and every time I keep telling people, it really matters a lot about the people. You got to have the right people, train the people correctly. Your threat modeling should show this stuff. Even the CIS controls have one buried a little deep about training for people. So, cannot neglect that. Always have that plug in somehow. Slides will be available. They're already on my website. That's where I stole them from today due to too long of a story with a computer screw up. Never grab the wrong shit when you're running out the door to a conference at the last minute. This slide has absolutely nothing to fucking do with this presentation. But I love it, so I put it in every presentation because it's my presentation and I can. Love this thing. I actually send this thing randomly with text to people now and then. I'll just throw them this one. It's my favorite one. Ancient fucking aliens. That's how we got hacked. Advanced aliens, right? Yeah, because it couldn't just be something simple ever. So, kind of when I was talking about earlier, I can take something like the attack matrix and lay it out that way. But basically, like you look at a web service, how do you get in? You break in through the APIs for the mobile. You break in through a mobile client, through a browser, through the web platform itself by injecting business logic. Bigger terms into the threat modeling. That's why I haven't found a way to make use of the one that gets more granular. I want just the bigger categories, so to speak. Right? Example of why I don't like software-based threat modeling. It doesn't cover USBs getting inserted into things. VoIP VLAN hopping doesn't come into play. You know, you look at all the books on, it's all about software threat modeling. Who gives a shit? That's not how I'm getting hacked. I shouldn't say it. We get hacked a lot through software, but a lot more stuff starts out by someone getting something plugged in or clicking on something, right? The virtual USB, get a user to click on something, it installs your shit, right? So, it doesn't account for lateral movement, the software-based ones. They just trying to look for every little place that you can compromise the software. So there you go. With Microsoft, they'll have you diagramming, identifying threats, figuring out how to fix each little part of the application and then validate it. I'm saying in the other threat modeling for the rest of the world, you identify the most common things that are going to happen to you and where and when or whatever. Then you map back your technical and procedural controls, and then you figure out how to test those controls and make sure they continue to function. And it's a continuous process. You'll see that a little bit later. See, nothing's changed. SQLi, 1998. Show of hands who remembers it was being published back then. Anyone here go back that far? Nice. Yeah, it's that old. Old shit. Things that can change your threat models. Moving to the cloud can make you re-examine everything again from a new perspective. By the way, I'm one of those people that believes cloud can be done securely, so I'm totally pro-cloud. Always have been as a security person from day one. Just learn how to do it right. Admin mistakes can become critical in the cloud. We've all seen that in the news enough. Compliance can change. So sometimes the OAuth changes their top 10, and that makes you change because of PCI, and that makes you change some of your threat modeling stuff to include new and different things that you weren't looking at before. So threat models are always shifting due to compliance, environmental changes, etc. I never explain this slide, I just throw it in. It's my fucking world. Yep, that's it. Done. Enough said, right? So what happened is at GrrCon a few years back, I watched a talk by Wolfgang Gorlick, who's actually speaking next door right now. And his talk on threat modeling reminded me of something, reminded me of how much of a dumbass I was being, because I was busy trying to threat model inside mind mapping software. Now, I've been in corporate America for over 20 years, actually, just InfoSec in 20 years. Now, the one thing I've learned about corporate America that I forgot and he had to remind me of is, if you want to get shit done, how do you get it done in a company? You put it in Excel. Guess what the #1 threat modeling tool in the world is to use? That's right, Microsoft Excel. You want to get shit done? That's how you get it done. His talk reminded me of that. Going to go back on risk for a minute before I get into the spreadsheet. So where do you start? People always say, well, we don't know what our high-value assets are. Bullshit. Check your DR list. Everyone has one. The list of 5 things, if they go down, the frickin' world ends. Better yet, what can't you patch? What won't they ever let people patch at all? There's your critical shit. It's an old consultant's trick. That's your high-value stuff, right? What's the oldest shit that's easiest to hack? That's your high-value stuff, 90% of the time, right? So, again, looking at likelihood, impact, probability versus possibility. That's the other thing about threat modeling. You can get carried away. I'm going to warn you. Threat modeling and risk analysis, call it whatever you want to, you can sit there and iterate yourself to death over what's possible. Never forget about the probability thing. There's a lot of shit that just ain't really probable that you shouldn't be wasting your time and money on. Recognize this. Qualitative is subjective. I favor that more so than quantitative. A little bit of quantitative for how much money you lose if something's down is fine. That's what I was saying before. If you put the formulas too complex, you try to build in too much math, I've never really seen it go anywhere, right? We don't really have actuarial tables in InfoSec. I suspect we may be able to build them if we really put our minds to it. I have people, friends of mine that are still in the insurance vertical that are arguing that we should be able to by now. But even that being said, possibility versus probability. That's what it comes down on. Always know your scope, purpose, assumptions, dependencies, right? So at the end of the day, funny thing is, and you get a different view. So you got basically corporate people like me. You've got red teamers. You've got forensicators, okay? All that shit added up together makes up the InfoSec industry, and all that is about money. It's about due diligence, responsible reduction of risk where appropriate. That's really what it's all about. Sorry, I know you guys all thought everything was all sexy and shit. That's just the tools and the stuff we play with. The reality is it's all business, right? So like sample factors for likely, getting into this. First of all, how do you know if something's going to happen X% chance within 5 years, 1 year, or 3 years? You really don't, right? But you might have stuff where some systems are internal facing versus external. Are they patched? Are they hardened? Do they have two-factored? Are they web-based, right? Skills needed by the attacker. Is a high level of skill to do the attack? Medium, low? Has it been commoditized? Is there a proof of concept code? You can come up with this big-ass list. You come up with a list every time, argue the list out for a while. I'm going to warn you, I'm on my 5th version where I'm currently at. You're going to make the list, and you're going to keep changing that freaking list for the first 6 months as you start analyzing risks and putting them on a risk register if you're building a risk register. That's normal. It's okay, as long as you're having structure all the way through. What we have found is we now have executives that look at the matrix of checkboxes and say, how did you get to high? How did you get to critical or whatever? They actually like it, and they like the transparency. Because then they can argue with it if they want to, or look at it and say, at least they know we went through something. Remember, let me go back a slide here. So, impact, likelihood, maps to high, moderate, low, right? When you're doing your risk register, lows get signed off at a certain level in the company, highs at a certain level, criticals at a certain level. So when ours starts getting up to the VEEP level, then you start figuring out, they're like, well, damn, I don't want to accept this risk. I want to spend the money to fix it. Let's find a remediation. Sometimes they don't, and they will sign off on it. That's fine, too. Here's the other thing, too. You know, God, from a movie in the 90s, don't kiss the client. Okay? IT is data custodians. You're an InfoSec. You don't own this shit. Stop taking it so damn personal. It's bullshit. Of all the stupid-ass things to lie awake over, I never lay awake over any employer I'm working for, whether or not they get hacked. Why do I give a shit? I raise the risks. They either accept them and sign off on them or not. Once you get a risk register in place, you're showing due diligence. When shit comes up, you're raising it up, bringing it to people's attention. They make a decision. Why would I give a rat's ass what decision they make as far as getting emotionally attached to it? Oh my God, you shouldn't do that. That's wrong. Right. Depends on legals and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just saying in general, I've seen people take a lot more problems with shit than they should in this industry, I'm telling you. And yeah, healthcare has regulations. PCI has stuff that you have to do. So there's certain things like that. But I'm telling you, when they say we're not going to spend $1 million to fix this part of the application that can't encrypt passwords properly, we'll live with it till the next version, and it's not a world-ending thing, it's a decision they made. But did you bring it up? As an InfoSec professional, your job is to bring shit up properly and not in panic mode either, and put it in terms that they actually understand. So that's why I argue I'll just go into it for this one. What the hell? All right, so anyone know who Musashi is? Okay, different than everyone in InfoSec for some reason grasped on to Sun Tzu, The Art of War. I have no freaking idea why. Actually read Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching, because that's the book it all came from. But Musashi had a school of 2 swords. So you have 2 swords, 2 katanas, not a katana and a little wakizashi, 2 katanas. Technical skills, business acumen, and personal skills. And the higher you go in the food chain, this sword's going to get put away and this one's going to get used more. Sometimes you'll use both. And earlier in your career, you'll use the technical one more. So if you can figure out how to reverse engineer malware, you can figure out business concepts, right? So stop bitching about the fact you can't figure out business. Just like the people that bitch about, oh, that one test for that cert. Okay, you're the smartest kids in the room. You don't get to say shit, except I'll figure it out, right? The stuff I see people do technically is so mind-blowing. You can figure shit out. You can also read books on communication and start working on that shit too, right? So, and people are wondering now, well, you're getting to be an awful lot of smartass. I could introduce you to someone if he was here that knew me 20 years ago and I was a complete, total fucking introvert. And there is no way in hell I would ever speak in front of people, period. You know how I did it? I'm a fucking geek, man. I grew up watching Mr. Spock, right? That's natural to me. I did it by reading books and practicing. It can be done. And I did it because someone else pulled me aside early in my career and said, you're a real good technical guy, but you're an asshole. Learn how to not be an asshole and learn how to communicate to people. I still have dinner with him now and then. He made my career. The book was How to Win Friends and Influence People. I read it, made action plans on it, and started working on it to make myself not an asshole. Although some people, when I speak, kind of get the bad impression. I'm just being a smart ass because I'm trying to be entertaining while I'm delivering the material. So, sample factors for potential impact: money, amount of downtime, number of records stolen, reporting requirements. That comes in healthcare a bit too. Notification requirements. That's where it starts getting into the money, and you can start getting some money put into it for how much it's going to hurt people. Again, keep it simple, especially if you're processing exceptions and risks. Do you know what the difference is between exception and a risk? A risk is something in the environment that you're already living with, whether you know it or not, until once you know it, you discover it. Exceptions are stuff that new projects cause. And then it's an exception to an existing control that you mandate through your standards and policies and procedures. But it's important because sooner or later, your executives will latch onto that. They're going to start tracking exceptions versus risks, and they're going to be more pissed off about exceptions because it means you're pulling new shit in the environment suboptimally, to put it politely. So that'll come into play when you get a little bit more mature in that process. Again, court, once you're hacked, you lose, right? It's all about being due diligent, right? How much do you want to spend to protect a $100 bill? This is the one, a lot of InfoSec people really lose sight of this, man, because they'll tell you $80 every time. By average, what I see on the internet, people want me to spend $80 to protect every $100. It's freaking insane. Would you do that shit in your own home? Example I'm going to use, people always argue me on this. My research says different. So basically, with car insurance, well, this one's more straightforward. With car insurance, I have a car. My wife has a car. I get in wrecks a hell of a lot more often than she does. I do all the running of errands on the weekends, but let's face it, she's actually a better driver than me, right? I'm okay with that. Actually, insurance companies will say that too, because trust me, when you have kids, the boys cost more. So boys are shittier drivers overall, but apparently, according to the insurance industry, which I believe. But so, where am I going to pay the more money for the lower deductible? On my wife's car or mine? On hers. Lower deductible because she's less likely to get in a wreck. You know what an InfoSec person would tell you? No. Pay more money everywhere. Right? Stop. Think of it like you would do with yourself. So overspending is a bad thing. So we have this thing we put together. My buddy Shannon and I just called it mods because I had nothing else to type at the time. It doesn't have a name. It's a goddamn spreadsheet. What we did is Wolfgang said, yeah, you can use this stuff from MySec, just reference it, which I do inside the spreadsheet as well. I added some of the stuff from Center for Internet Security and came up with a spreadsheet, right? We had some assumptions we had to make first on it and said, when canned tools exist, a bad actor will use them. So when there's an exploit, it's going to be used against you. We had to assume that. Assume the worst, right? The next one's a big one. Assume that your tools are implemented correctly. We all know that's kind of a laugh. And it's not people's fault. They usually don't have time to do it correctly. But for modeling, you have to assume certain things. Assume the countermeasures in place correctly, right? WAFs are not considered a permanent control. If your code needs to be fixed, fix your frickin' code, right? PIM's not only a technology, privileged identity management, right? It's also hardening and processes to reduce use of privilege to the environment. We had to have some stuff to frame this shit around. Because if we just assumed everything was implemented shitty, I mean, that would have an effect on the modeling as well, right? So what we did is we used the stages, right? That's the kill chain thing. External recon, internal breach, escalate privileges, establish persistence, internal reconnaissance, lateral movement, blah, 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 right? Leading up to data exfil. And then the point of this slide is we start adding all these columns, and then I kind of start taking them down. So over time, I find out I want the controller countermeasure, how I'm going to test it, and how often I'm going to test it. You'll see other columns in the spreadsheet. If you download it, it's included with the PowerPoint. Man, the more I add columns, the worse shit gets. So it's all about like, here's what I think they're going to do to me. Here's what I think will stop it. Here's how I would test it to make sure it's going to stop it. And here's how often I would test it to make sure the control's actually still working. So that's kind of where we get at on this. So like an example, I'll just run through some of these. And here's one, see, attack complexity came back into play. And I'm not sure if I really like using that or not. So I'm leaving all this shit in the slides to show you how it can get scatterbrained. I'm just not even sold on some of this shit myself yet, right? Like I said at the beginning, it's kind of not an easy, I can't give you just this, do this and you will be threat modeling properly. Anyone that ever tells you that's full of shit, okay? So you got attack complexity, control countermeasures, so get on wireless, WIPs or NAC. Control type, is it detective, preventive, or corrective? I'm not sure. Sometimes I like to see that, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I don't want to fill all that shit out. How do you test it? Add a rogue and see if your WIPs detects it, right? Remove a port blocker, try to use the port, whatever. How often are you going to test it? Semi-annually, annually? How much money do you got? How much staff do you got? That's an example of an external recon one. So attack complexity, the question is, why would I struggle? So I like to do that because I know I'm going to eventually take attack complexity and turn it to probability on the risk register. So some of this stuff does feed the risk register. I'll get to that in a second, where you use all this. So we do have all these columns for a reason. That's one of the reasons on that column. What I'm not going to do is, this stuff you can go over at your own leisure. I leave that in the sample that you download. So you can see a sample of like an initial breach, privilege escalation, establishing persistence, internal reconnaissance. So I got little samples up there. Lateral movement. A word on that. I love pointing this one out. Keep reliving the year 2003-ish. Lieberman software came out in 2002 with what is now everyone uses labs for, password randomization for Windows. The pass the hash technique is nothing really new in the sense that instead of grabbing the hash and cracking the password, you pass the hash around. So it's a faster version of an old tried and true tactic. Nothing really changes, it just gets optimized. But the reality is, the best defense against that shit's password randomization in a Windows environment, and that countermeasure has been available since the year 2002. Holy shit, we suck. That's why we drink so much. Right? Got a data exfil. See, that's out of order, right? Must have been editing that shit when I was buzzed. And then I always put this up twice because I like people to see it twice. So remember likelihood and potential impact, everything you do. Keep remembering that, likelihood and potential impact. Possibility versus probability. Get that through your head. That's a reminder for me. No mind mapping. Excel. So back to an earlier point, where the hell do you integrate this stuff? Why do we have all those crazy columns in there? Well, part of projects, you got to do threat modeling as part of new shit coming in the door, or when you're implementing something and changes are being made. Threat modeling comes in for purple-red team exercises. How else do you know what you want a purple team and red team? You figure that's kind of it all. See how it all kind of ties in together? So your red team, purple team program, which is a talk in and of itself, in order to consume that properly, you got to map that against your threat model so you know you're testing what you need to be. If you only have money for 3 things, which one of the 3 do you test? Security exceptions, right? Likelihood and impact. How big of an exception is it? High, medium, or low? Risk assessments. If you're doing against Center for Net Security Top 20 or NIST or whatever, you can add in a risk. That's the combination of the likelihood plus the possibility. So you got that risk in there. It all ties in together. So your threat models kind of have linkages into your risk management program, which is really what should be driving through the risk register and exception process, your security spend. Your prioritized, diligent security spend. It's all this shit boils down to, man. And I used to think it was just all about hardening systems way back when and running scans of shit. I'm like, holy crap, what did I get into? This is InfoSec. This is why we drink. Life in general, right? There you go. Threat model is shit out of everything. Yeah, it's me being a smartass. So, yeah. The real smartass one, here's one. And this is not from personal experience. Don't mix acid and angel dust. Anyway. Fucking 80s. So, what do we end up doing anyways? Here you go. Hardening, patching, vulnerability management, segmentation, IPS, IDS, anti-malware, DLP. God, I fucking hate DLP, and I end up doing it more often than I would want to. I really hate DLP. Advanced something, whatever the fuck it is. Someone will sell it to you, don't worry. WAFs, web application firewalls, right? Logging, always. Never enough of that. FIM, proxy, software development lifecycle. We're finally starting to get traction on that as an industry after bitching about it for 15 years. So you end up doing a lot of this kind of stuff. This is what your countermeasures end up taking the form of, in addition to sometimes just pure process-based. So, and I'm running a little fast because it's a Friday, just so you guys know. I know it's late on a Friday. So threat modeling, basically, the point of this is you need to do it. it shows due diligence, it shows the logic behind your security spend and the implementations of your countermeasures. So it's a good thing in that respect. And then it also keeps you out of other stupid meetings. So I found that one. Block off time for threat modeling. No one will screw with that. It's like, oh my God, without the threat modeling, we're not going to be spending properly or know what the hell we're supposed to do. And they'll just leave you the hell alone. And next thing, now you got like 4 hours where people just won't screw with you. Right? Go to a conference room so you can't get the walk-ups. Right? And then another one, keep hope out of your threat models. Right? Like love, hope is false. Now, where'd that comment come from? Fucking Hallmark. Most evil company on the planet. So not only am I losing a portion of my income to Hallmark stores, now I've been subjected. Anyone ever had to watch a Hallmark movie? Holy shit. So what I want to see is a little change in their Hallmark movies. I would like to see like that church kill scene from the Kingsman movie put into one of their movies. And another one I'd like them to show like, oh, the princess and prince fall in love. Yeah, show them 3 months later. Then show them after they have kids. Let's see how happy their fucking household is now. So yeah, just a pet peeve, man. Fucking Hallmark. So that's just anger at Hallmark put into a slide. So the other point is your InfoSec program, meaning really your stuff can be hacked at any time if someone really wants it. So you want to be able to show that you've been doing due diligence and think about how you're going to protect it. Incident response, I have an entire talk on incident response because that is so important. And that's when something bad happens, because it will. Incident response, I can't even, you'll have privacy incidents in some companies versus security incidents. Unbelievable how much you'll use that. That's like worth every time you spend on the preparation phase of that is absolutely and completely, totally worth it. Yeah, I know I'm plugging alcohol. You know what sucks? We have like I hate like, I've been accused of, well, you're promoting alcohol and everyone like drinks so much in our industry. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I don't really have a good answer how to stop that. And, you know, right now the only thing I'm thinking is there's 3 hours between me and a bottle of vodka when I get out of here to drive home. So, conclusion, right? I actually put a conclusion in one of these. Wow, okay. So, use Excel. Honestly, every time I try to move it back into mind mapping or get fancy or do anything else, I screw myself. When I stay in Excel, it keeps me honest, because I can also just port the stuff around the different Office applications I'm using. Because Excel, PowerPoint, and Word are what we use to communicate in the business world, right, especially. I'm sure government's not that much different, but I've never had the misfortune to work in that environment. So, big ticket items. Actually, pretty much all items should go to the risk register. So we even track the lows there. We track what's been accepted, what's been done for remediation. What you'll find when you get more mature with this kind of stuff, your threat modeling will help keep this program honest, because the risk management program is also people are going to run statistics on how many risks you got of which kind, how many were signed off over time. It becomes a very critical part of your overall security program. How do you know your security posture? You know your security posture by your risk management program, and your risk management program ain't going to do shit correctly without threat modeling to back it up. How's that for like blunt but true? So here's the thing. You're doing it already. All of us do this at some level. This is just getting you to sit down and think about it in a slightly more structured format without putting so much structure in it that you never do the shit. It's that happy medium, because it really is. I've been going back and forth on this for years. That's why I was, like I said, the oh shit moment. When Wolfgang's talk, I'm like, ah, shit, I should have kept it in Excel. What the hell am I doing? So keep it as simple as you can. And again, that's the thing. You're going to use it everywhere, and it's like the bacon of InfoSec. How's that? Always a good thing. I always have a picture of a dumpster fire in my talks. That's my world. People now ask me what I do for a living, because, you know, they took over the term cyber security, all this shit. I just say, basically, I take care of dumpster fires, various dumpster fires all over the place. Now to make people feel old? Yeah, no shit. There's an oldie but goodie. What I usually do is try to tell people, so some of these things, I've had this slide and I had to grab a different deck, so this is a slide from a security industry thing more than a con. Get on Twitter. It's worth it for the threat intel. Just learn to ignore the drama and all the other shit. And then I said something about incident response. There's some chapters in this book that are purely about the process, more because the technical stuff changes pretty fast, right? What they might have on forensics probably has already changed, but it's just good stuff to get into. And then at this point, I actually have time for some QA. If anyone has any questions, and if not, say question. Yeah, the comment is this is going to come in play with cyber insurance. Absolutely. I think cyber insurance is going to drive actuarial tables, taking it a step further. I think companies are going to be expected to show how they've gauged the probabilities of the different bad things that could happen to them. Totally agree with that. That's why I say start now. Everything from the threat model ultimately pours into the risk register, into your risk management framework. So you can show, I can tell you what we're doing and why for major spends in security in my environment and how we got to that conclusion, and we can go back more importantly months later and say, why the hell did we make that decision? And we can see what we were thinking, because that's important too. All right, I appreciate everyone's time on a Friday. One more? So the spreadsheet, if you go to my site, it's a shitty little site. I do not hardly maintain it at all. It's not supposed to look good. If you download this presentation, this one is one that I did at B-Sides Chicago. The spreadsheet is embedded in the PowerPoint. I'm a corporate guy. Of course I'm going to do that, right? So I just download the PowerPoint, grab the spreadsheet from within that, and the last slide, you'll see the spreadsheet in there. And like I said, it's got all the links to the references where I got the stuff. This isn't me being a genius. This is just me aggregating stuff in a way that is hopefully useful to people. I use it a bit myself, obviously. So it's just trying to herd cats and without killing yourself doing it, because I've never found good answers for this. There's no silver bullet for this. I sure as hell have found nothing commercial that addresses this. So kind of a gap. Question? So on my website, you'll see slide decks for incident response. I think there was a recorded talk on incident response here. So I know there's one out there too on Iron Geek's site. I know there is somewhere, an incident response one. And it is literally, the whole focus of that is I walk through all the stages of incident response, but more importantly, it's like, here's how to get this shit in place and start it quick. Because again, it's always brain dump format. I still use that. I've used that in multiple companies, have friends of mine that have used that. So that's how we start IR, bless you. That's how we start IR programs. Can't underestimate how important incident response is. All right. Appreciate everyone's time.